What was your all-time favourite moment for Wei Yun, who was your biggest character?
Well, I don't know if I have a moment, but my favorite episode, of course, was Faith, Treachery, and the Great River, where I mean, it's unbelievable that a series that had 9 series regulars would basically tell 8 of them, or 7 of them, you know, you have the week off, so that they could concentrate on a recurring character for the entire hour. That's a pretty humbling thing, you know, and a pretty gutsy and brave. You can't do that now. The networks and the studios would just have a fit, but that's a credit to Ira Stephen Bear, who is the head writer and executive producer of Deep Space Nine. He's visionary, and he really didn't care what anybody thought. He just kind of muscled through with what he wanted to do, and ultimately he's absolutely right and vindicated in what he was doing. I mean, Deep Space Nine is iconic.
And it's certainly my favourite series. I think because it came away from Next Gen, and Next Gen everything was all wrapped up at the end of the episode, and next week we were on to something else. And I mean that of course was Gene's vision, was always that the future was all the troubles were sorted. But Deep Space Nine,
it's a philosophic difference. You know, the networks wanted standalone episodes so that when it goes into syndication, we can mix them up. It doesn't matter. They don't have to be in order. You don't have to have any information in order to watch the episode, right? But Ira had a more literary slant on it, and was more interested in a longer arc with a kaleidoscope of characters that intermingled and laced together, and stories that were dropped and then picked up later on, and it was much more of a tapestry, so it was a philosophical difference, and Ira had to fight some battles in order to get that done, and I you know, it stands the test of time, you know.
absolutely. Now, just finally, very quickly, the remastering process that's going on with Next Gen, and now Enterprise is joining the fleet.
Deep Space Nine, they're going to do after that. Yep.
Yes, well, and we'll just look forward to the Jeffrey Combs special set. Like we have the Borg set, the Q set. We need a Jeffrey Combs set.
Oh wow! Now you're blowing my mind. I don't know.
But have you seen Enterprise remastered? Have you seen any of the remastered episodes?
No, I haven't. I did go in and do some an interview and some commentary. You know, they interviewed me, and they also did an interview with the whole cast, and they included me in that, which I was really grateful about. You know, just kind of talking about the series and how it ended, and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So, you know, it's going to be a really lovely package. It really is. The struggle is more with the older stuff that was shot on film. It's really time-consuming and very expensive to sort of upgrade all those physical effects to a digital world, you know. But they're doing it. Enterprise was shot digitally, so the effects hold up, and you know, Deep Space Nine, Next Gen, you know, kind of a different story. But they're doing it slowly but surely. I'm really interested to see what it looks like.
Yeah, I'd love to see all the big space battles in the later seasons remastered in beautiful high def.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that.
And Wei Yun's hairline.
Wei Yun's hairline. Digital? Well, they can fix it, I suppose.
Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time. Enjoy Australia, and we'll chat to you on DVDs.
Thanks. Long live Trek.
Well, Trekzone.org 10th birthday celebrations continue, firing up the satellite once again. It's only a short little hop to Perth from the Brisbane studios. Alice Cridge is in Perth for the Revelation Film Festival. Alice, thanks so much for your time.
A pleasure. I'm happy to talk to Trek to Trekkers or Trekkies anywhere in the world. Great big family.
Trekkers or Trekkies. I think that'll be the next thing I have to investigate as to exactly what we're calling ourselves these days. So obviously, Alice, you came into the franchise with First Contact. What was it like to join this massive franchise that is Star Trek and to be essentially become Captain Picard's arch enemy in that movie?
I grew up in South Africa, and television arrived in South Africa the year after I left. So I have this great black hole where cultural references should be. And I had never seen an episode of Star Trek. I'd heard of this thing of beam me up, Scotty, but I really didn't know what it meant. So that was my point of reference. And I was sent the 3 scenes of the Borg Queen by my agent to learn and go in and do an audition. And my husband and I had a friend who occasionally wrote for Star Trek. And I rushed over to his house because he had some episodes, some Borg episodes. And I watched those and I went in to do the audition. Thought I'd done a really bad job. Came out, got in the car and stopped at the first payphone I could find, because of course there were no mobile phones at that point, and said to my agent, I've done a really bad audition and please call them and ask them if I can do it again. Anyway, I didn't hear from them for 3 weeks, and they called and said come in again, and I got the role, but I had no idea what I was walking into. I had no concept of this amazing extended family that is the Star Trek community. And it has been an enormous joy for me. I meet us all over the world, and there's this instant point of reference, this instant mutual interest. It's been a very, very happy experience. Making it was very happy, and the whole afterlife has been very happy too. I love going to conventions. I love seeing grown-ups in costumes speaking Klingon. I don't think we get to do stuff like that enough as adults. So I love conventions because we're all there in Borg outfits, in looking like Ferengi. I love it. I think it's brilliant.
I had a chat with Jeffrey Coombs at Oz Comic Con in Melbourne on the weekend, and he mentioned that similar sort of experiences as yourself in terms of, and he mentioned it as a gauge of how well or how his work is perceived and how loved he is by the fans purely because of people that dress up. Or get into their costumes at conventions and are very excited to meet the actors at these conventions, at signings and stuff like that. Is there any? Have you ever had someone stand out to you at a convention? Someone that's stuck in your mind, someone that you've remembered?
Oh, there have been many. I mean, many people who have made their own Borg suits and come to my table to show me. A team of scientists from NASA arrived one day wearing T-shirts saying resistance is futile. And they said whenever we hit a problem that feels insoluble, we put on these T-shirts, which was brilliant. Someone arrived at my table one day and said, may I take off my T-shirt? I'd like to show you something. And I thought, well, I'm surrounded by lots of people, so it's got to be okay. And I said, yes. And he had the Borg Queen tattooed across his chest and down the side of his body onto his back was this image of the Borg Queen. I was speechless. I was absolutely floored. So there have been some astonishing moments, yes. But in general, it's really lovely just to talk to people. You know, whose lives aren't necessarily involved in the film industry, but who participate in a joyful, enthusiastic and wonderful way in this particular story, the Star Trek story.
Mm. Now, of course, Susanna Thompson took over as the Queen in Voyager, but then you returned for the finale Endgame, and also lent your voice to the Armada series of games. Were there any challenges of picking up the mantle that you and Susanna sort of shared as the Borg Queen between series and games?
I decided when I came on to do the finale that I actually wouldn't watch Susanna's episodes, because I didn't want to kind of have an image in my head, not necessarily of anyone else doing it, but it's almost better not to have an image in your head, just to be in the moment. But I did read all the episodes, all the Borg episodes. No, the challenge for me was a couple of nights before I was due to start filming, it suddenly dawned on me. You would have thought it had dawned immediately, but it didn't. That it was the Borg Queen and 2 women, as opposed to the Borg Queen and 2 men. And I called one of the producers and I said, "Oh my goodness, part of the energy of the Borg Queen in First Contact was a really, really very kind of sexual energy, and I'm going to be acting with 2 women." And he said, "Well, I tell you what, just think of her as omnisexual." And I thought, I can do that. I can do omnisexual. And that was, then I just went ahead and had a good time. They were wonderful. Both of those actresses were truly a joy and immensely generous to work with. And I was also working, of course, largely with the crew that I filmed First Contact with. So it was really, really lovely to be working with the same people again after a break. There was actually a 4th encounter with the Borg Queen, which was that they did an installation in Vegas at the Hilton that was the Borg Queen, the Borg taking over a spaceship, an experimental lab that was in space, and it was shot in 3D, and you went into this spaceship and were taken over by the Borg as the audience. So that was the 4th time that I actually worked with a character.
What was it like to revisit your character and expand on her a little bit more?
To keep revisiting her, it was lovely. I haven't ever worked in series television in that way. I've come in as a guest in series television with an arc of 6 or 10 or 12 episodes, both in English television and American television. So one had one arc to do, rather than going away and coming back a year or 2 years later. The only time I've ever done that has been with the Borg Queen, and I enjoyed it enormously. It was always interesting because stuff had happened, you'd lived a bit of your life, you'd had other influences, you'd had other experiences, and all of that informs how you come back. So I enjoyed it. It was entirely unexpected. When I finished First Contact, I thought that was that, and that was, I wouldn't encounter the Borg Queen again, but it was lovely to do so.
Now, since since Trek, you have continued acting with many credits to your name since 2001. But most recently, and the reason for your visit to Australia and to Perth is the new movie that you're starring in called Jail Caesar. And I'd love to check out the trailer first.
With me, I bring my army. Kill who you want to kill. Burn wherever you want to burn.
The gods have deserted us!
Welcome to the world.
Wow, that trailer looks incredible. Alice, what's the story behind the movie?
I not only have a very small role in it, but I was also a producer on it. And I find it to be a challenging, engrossing, illuminating, inspiring film. It's been a very long-term commitment, and the project has become more and more interesting the longer my relationship with it went on. It's a telling of the story of the adolescence of Julius Caesar. He was considered by his peers to be a complete waste of space, total washout, a debtor, couldn't hold down a job. He was bisexual in a very stoic and heterosexual Rome. He was totally inappropriate. No one thought he would ever amount to anything. And at the age of 33, he does his first military campaign, and in the next 12 years he becomes one of the most high-profile statesmen general of all time. Huge, towering historical figure. And Paul Schoolman, who is my husband, came upon this years ago, because until quite recently the history books didn't talk about that period in his life. Now they do. But Paul pieced together the period of his adolescence and early adulthood by reading all the authors who were writing at the time. People like Crassus and Cinna, and then subsequently Suetonius, historians who soon after Caesar wrote about him. And he pieces together this story about how this kid grows up in what is effectively a gangland landscape. It was gang warfare. They were powerful generals who had their own private armies, and they were all fighting for territory. And so we tell the story of his adolescence in a series of prisons, with largely prisoners as actors, 300 prisoners, and some astounding actors like Derek Jacobi playing Sulla, savage dictator, and it's a breathtaking performance. I think it's one of Derek's best performances on film, actually. So it's a project, it's a film that happens on many, many layers. You can take it on whatever layer accesses you. It's quite wonderful, and I hope everyone makes an effort to go onto. I tell you what, this is a call for all Trekkies to go onto IMDb, the International Movie Database, and go to the Jail Caesar site and just post a request saying, we want to see this movie. Because believe it or not, we, the viewers, actually can influence the outcome of a movie's life. We've been told by the sales agent who's picked up Jail Caesar that likes, if you go onto IMDb and review a movie and give it, for example, 7 stars, buyers of other territories are more likely to pick it up. You can actually let buyers who live in a very kind of isolated environment, all they meet are other buyers. They go around festivals and markets just talking to film buyers. Then I really don't think they're in touch with what people on the street want to see. And the fact that most of us have a really varied diet in terms of the kind of film and television we want to watch. We don't want to watch just big tentpole movies. We want to watch kind of everything that's out there, that's interesting.
Something that makes us think.
So go onto IMDb and just put up a post saying, we want to see this movie, bring it to Australia.
Absolutely. Well, that's the call out for all the Trekkies out there. The Queen has requested that, so jump onto Trekzone.org. I'll put the links up on the website and follow them through, and let's bring Jail Caesar to Australia. But Alice, where did the idea come from to film inside prisons?
Well, Paul had wanted to find a way of telling this story on film that was not about togas and, the Colosseum. And he just woke up one morning in the way that creative people like him do. And he thought, Caesar was perceived as being absolutely at the bottom of the bin, that he'd never amount to anything, that he couldn't, just as I said, a total degenerate, to wash out, a useless person. But he was animated by dreams and ambitions, and inside him was the dream of Julius Caesar. And Paul suddenly woke up and thought one morning, popped into his head, if anyone would truly understand what Caesar felt like, it would be people who were in prison. Because mostly, unless you've had to do with people who are incarcerated, who, for the most part, are people like us, who've not been incarcerated, spent a lot of time in prison, but that was voluntary, who've made a mistake, who've made some errors of judgment. But that doesn't mean they're not full of hopes for the future, full of dreams and ambitions, but they're generally perceived by society at large as being failures and sort of on the edges of society.
They're almost
and that's
dehumanised in a
how
way.
Caesar was perceived. And so I think Paul just felt that if we shot it inside a prison, there would be this huge empathy for Caesar's journey, this absolutely direct understanding of Caesar's journey, and no one would be acting. It would be part of their lives, part of their experience. And he just wanted to access that raw, honest connection, and that is what is in the film. It is absolutely immediate. The prisoners do astonishing work, and it's true and real and raw and very compelling to watch. It's not in the least bit voyeuristic, because it's not about prisoners in prison. It's about this kid, Julius Caesar. But the milieu in which that story is told has a directness and a realness that is astonishing.
What were the inmates like to work with, to control them and obviously get the shots needed to make the film? What were they like to work with?
Everyone that came to the project in 3 different prisons in 3 different countries. We filmed in Cardiff Prison in Wales and in Alberta in Drumheller Penitentiary, and the bulk of the film is shot in Pollsmoor Prison in Cape Town in South Africa, where Nelson Mandela spent some time. Every prisoner that came to the project came on a voluntary basis. No one was compelled to come. They came because they wanted to, and they stayed because they wanted to. And everyone had a spark and something special to offer. All human beings have something special to offer, but sometimes we need to be given the circumstances in which that can flower or take shape. And very often, I think people who wind up making choices that end them up in prison haven't necessarily had a chance to develop their particular ability, their particular potential. And somehow or other, the work that we were doing, although we didn't go in as social workers, that's what happened. So everyone came forward with 100% commitment, with complete candor, and just gave of themselves, so that the group became really self-protecting and self-policing, as it were. Everyone was committed to the work, and everyone was really committed to it reaching completion and getting out into the world. So there was like 100% focus, and it was very, very inspiring. And for me as an actor, it was an object lesson in acting, because the prisoners that we worked with, male and female, worked without any concept of performing. They just were in the moment. And that's what you need to do as an actor. But it's very easy to lose sight of that, because you learn how to make things effective, you learn shortcuts, you learn tricks, you learn what works. And the moment you get stuck in that space, you start to lose truthfulness and being in the momentness and authenticity. So they were a real lesson for me as an actor.
The movie has won some awards at other film festivals. What's the audience reaction been like, those that have seen it?
The audience reaction so far, some people find it more than they can cope with. I guess it's just quite disturbing. You do go into the heart of incarceration, not in a negative way, but it's in your face. But for the most part, audiences, for example, at the screening on Sunday in Perth, it was a fairly typical response that at the Q&A afterwards, Paul and I came down to the front of the theatre, and there was a very prolonged silence. And you sit in the silence and you're waiting for someone to ask a question, and you're wondering, why is no one saying anything? And always what the reason is that the film happens on so many layers that you're still busy processing it and putting it together and making all the connections, because it's a very resonant piece of work. There's a moment in the film that always astonishes me. Crassus, who's a Roman character, and who basically funded Caesar's political career. He was funding a number of political careers. And Caesar very cleverly plays him off against Cicero. Caesar becomes a master manipulator. And there's a moment, and Caesar has spent millions of Crassus's money, and he hasn't quite produced the results that Crassus want. And there's a moment where Crassus says to Caesar, I don't want to give it away, but there is an astonishing moment. And every time I see that moment, I think to myself, oh my goodness, that is Obama and the lobbies, Obama and corporate money. So for me, the film has the most unexpected resonances, and I think that's what keeps audiences talking about it. We came out of the Q&A and we walked into the bar of the cinema and we were still talking about it in a group, 40 minutes, an hour later. And people generally go on and on thinking about it for days. We've had emails from people saying, I'm still thinking about it. I'm still waking up with those images in my head. So that's my experience of the response. People are either totally overwhelmed by it or are so engaged that they start off not being able to speak about it, and then it's like a torrent.
Well, Alice, it really does sound very interesting, and I can't wait to see it. But as you said, you've got to jump. The shout out to the Trekkies out there to jump onto IMDb and give it a good rating and get it into Australia and get it distributed around the world as well. Not obviously not
Wonderful.
just to Australia. But Alice, thank you. All the links there will be on Trekzone.org. Follow through to the 10th birthday coverage. But Alice, thank you so much for sitting down and having a chat with me.
My great pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Well, we are now joined by gate technician Walter, aka Gary Jones. Gary, thank you so much and welcome to Australia.
Yeah, no problem. It's awesome to be here. I love Australia.
How many chevrons were locked to get here?
There were six encoded, one locked.
Oh, fantastic!
See,
fantastic.
You obviously could never operate the Stargate.
No, well, there were just too many blinky light units.
There were way too many blinky light units. Yeah.
Now, what was it like to work on a show such as Stargate? Obviously, in the beginning, it wasn't anything major, but it turned into this massive cult show. What was it like?
Well, for me, I was a character that I didn't really get, until I got there and was really involved in the show, I didn't really sort of see where I fit in. But the more they kept bringing me back and say, my agent would call me and say, they've written you into this other episode. Are you available? Yes, I am available. And so I'd show up, and then I was like counting all the chevrons, and that got to be funny after a while because it was like, trying to make that really serious. Chevron 1 encoded, Chevron 2 encoded, Chevron 3 encoded, doing my little typey thing. And then after a while, I noticed in some of the scripts, they would just cut it down I go Chevron 1 encoded, and then they just cut away. Like, yeah, we know what you're doing. Yeah, we get it, Gare. You don't need to say 7 of them.
So do you reckon Walter ever got promoted out of that position because he was so good?
I got promoted. Every season I came back, I was promoted, and they'd give me like a new set of ribbons and like things, and I go, what the hell are these? They go, oh, yeah, you got promoted. And I go, what for? Like typing under duress or something? Like what? Like, and I go, what did I get to promoted for? They go, you just got promoted. You just got, don't worry about it. So I went from a sergeant to a staff sergeant to a chief master sergeant to, I just kept going up and up and up. And then finally I had fans coming up to me who were actually in the military going to me, well, you can't go any higher. I'm like, really? Yeah, you can't go any higher than what you've got. You've hit the ceiling. I'm like, oh, so I can't get any more medals? No, you're done. I go, so what kind of dental plan have I got? And I'd ask fans what my dental plan was and how many holidays I could take. And they'd tell me. Like the production never told me, but the fans would tell me. It was pretty funny. Yeah.
And you'd probably work less hours as a gate technician than you would as an actor, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think so.
Now,
although it looked like when the show was on, like I was there all the time, like I never went home.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
No.
You were just part of the set and they just wheeled you out from props.
Exactly, and I never got out of that chair. They just wheeled me in that chair and put me at the desk.
And then what was it like working with the three greatest names in television? Do you know the names that I'm talking about?
Richard, Dean, and Anderson.
Yeah, that's them.
That was actually the law firm that represented me. Whenever I had contractual problems, call Richard, Dean, and Anderson. We'll solve all. Have you been hit by a Stargate? Call us.
But yeah, seriously, Richard Dean Anderson, greatest actor. The only thing that was wrong with him in SG-1 was that he lost his mullet from MacGyver. Was it a big moment?
Because the show was originally called Star Mullet.
Star Mullet?
Yeah.
Or Starguyver?
Yeah, Starguyver. I was, working, we all just kind of like did what we did, and Richard was, fine to work with, and, I can't really say, like, we didn't hang out, you know what I mean? And
he was too good? He was in his own trailer?
I'd be like, oh, yes, yeah. I didn't share a trailer with Richard Dean Anderson. It's like, dude, I'm changing. Can you turn around? Can you, look away? I'm putting my flight suit on. No, there was none of that. He had his own trailer. Yeah.
I think to tie it back to Star Trek.
I had a room with a toilet.
Well, that's really all you need, isn't
Yeah,
it?
and a place I could just hang my coat. That's all I need.
That's all you need.
It really is all you need.
See,
so what was he doing?
Well, had the mullets. Had to have three mullets.
Collection of mullets just hanging up on the wall.
Yeah. But tying it back to Star Trek, I think that Richard and Bill Shatner would be the two ultimate guests for this website to get. We'll never get them because they're so high, but we can always dream.
Yeah, I was at a convention up in Canada a couple of months ago, and I was in a bar having a drink with another guy who's like he's another sort of science fiction guy, and so this young girl was coming around with selling 50-50 tickets in the bar, and he says to her, he goes, hey, we got a famous guy here. And she's like, what do you mean? He goes, this guy was on Stargate, and she flips out. She's like, you were on Stargate? Oh my God! She goes mental, and I'm like, yeah, I was on Stargate. She goes, oh my God, I can't believe there's a guy from Stargate right here. Oh, can I have my photo taken with you? And I was like, yeah, sure, okay, no problem. Put my arm around her, she's shaking, and she's like, oh, my friend takes the photo, and then she goes, oh my God, it's so cool to be having a photo with a Stargate guy. You're in my phone, and she goes, I just do have one question for you. What does this mean? And I just go, that's live long and prosper from Star Trek. And she goes, Star Trek? I go, yeah, I was on Stargate. And she goes, what the hell is Stargate? And I go, oh man, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's just a, I can't go into it now because you have no idea what it is. And she goes, oh, you weren't even on Star Wars? I go, no, I wasn't on Star Trek. I wasn't on Star Wars. I was on Stargate. And she's like, okay, well, but I'm going to keep you in my phone. So I'm like, oh, so just a strange guy from a show you've never watched. You don't even know what it is. And I'm in your phone. I think that's the kind of level of fame that I was looking forward to, actually.
Right, yeah, well, congratulations on that. Other fans, are there other fans that really love seeing you? What's it like coming to conventions?
It was very strange at first because, you just walk into a hotel and everybody who's here is for this, for the convention, and they see you and they go, oh my God, it's you! It's like the gate guy, and so it took me a little bit to get used to it, but now I'm completely used to it, and I just have people coming up, oh, you're my favorite, and I have a lot of military people coming up to me and saying, you totally represented us, and I'm like, dude, okay, I did my best in that flight suit.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for your time, and good luck in the future.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot.
Joe Flanagan joins me now. He, of course, was Colonel John Shepard on Stargate Atlantis, the follow-up series. Joe, what was Stargate like?
To work on, it was a lot like being able to play, and then somebody was giving you a check. So, not so bad.
And that's sort of been what everyone that I've interviewed that's been an actor on a sci-fi series has said. It's all just about playing and getting paid to do it and having fun.
Yeah, well, there is a tremendous amount of work involved. I mean, don't be fooled. You're on set for 12 to 15 hours a day easily, and so you clock some serious hours. But if you're with a good group of people, it's a lot of fun. And if the material is interesting, it's great. And then you get this fan base that you can't beat. You can't beat a sci-fi fan base.
What's it like coming to conventions like this and having the fans out there? There's a queue waiting for you right now to go back and sign autographs. What's that like, going out there and seeing those people that really want to see you?
I don't understand why anybody wants to see me, to be perfectly honest with you. I keep thinking they're going to realize that maybe it's a mistake. They're looking for somebody else. But I feel tremendously grateful, is what I feel. And I didn't really know what it all meant when I first started doing my show. But as time has gone on, I realized what a powerful
Well, welcome to the very first Trekzone.org interviews podcast. We're going to do this monthly and have a chat to anybody and everybody from science fiction. First up this month, Larry Nemenchek joins me from the PAC TV studios in Los Angeles. Larry, thanks so much for your time.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me.
Now, you got started in Star Trek back in the early 90s, writing The Next Generation Companion. You've written a couple of episodes of, or you contributed a script to Voyager, and now you're actually acting on a fan series called Star Trek Continues as Dr. McCoy. How did it all come about?
Well, the easy answer is to blame my 9th grade science teacher, Mrs. Pollard, wherever you are, who shamed me into watching Star Trek because she couldn't believe I wasn't watching it in the after school reruns that we had, where tons and tons and tons of people came to Star Trek if they didn't see it prime time in the 60s. So yeah, I blame Mrs. Pollard, and and then of course the show itself for hooking me in, and a lot of patient people since then, a lot of good friends.
So what was it like getting started in Star Trek, writing that companion?
Technology is such a part of our lives now, way more than it was in the 60s and 80s. If nothing else, and we always talk about flip-top cell phones, but everything, pads, tablets, medical, the guiding principle of medical technology design, and weapon. You can't read a science article about some kind of new conceptual breakthrough without the writer of the story, the journalist, thinking that he's going to ground people by using a Star Trek reference. Maybe occasionally a Harry Potter for cloaking devices or whatever, even though I've obviously forgotten about the Romulans. But but just watch your mainstream media. How many references like that? They start off with Star Trek as a springboard to get into the newest breakthrough toward a transporter or toward phasers, or it's amazing.
Now, for 7 years, you were also the managing editor of Star Trek Communicator magazine, and you've also been you were also a contributor and producer on the official website until that was sort of closed down and just became a shell like so many other websites. But so being behind the scenes as well and taking in all this information, what was that like? To be looking after these publications for the fans.
Well, and I should mention that StarTrek.com is been revived the last 2 or 3 years, and is still a slightly different business model, but still blowing and going. And I've gotten to contribute to the modern StarTrek.com too. But I've just always, if I've been successful in this, and of course there was a lot more to talk about when we had 1 and 2 series going at a time with a movie every couple of years. It's been a little bit more fallow time as far as what Hollywood is cranking out. But I just have always approached it by what I wanted to do as a fan. And when I was a younger fan, I just remembered seeing what I saw, but I also had questions, and I see things that people weren't asking about. And it wasn't like, how fast is Warp 7.4? It would be, what about this? Or did you ever think about going down this path? or just knowing what I didn't know, you know, blind spots that I found out later about, like, oh, you almost went down this path, but it became this instead.
Wow.
And or did you ever consider this? I mean, just those kind of questions, whether it was in technology or story writing or just, you know, the Star Trek conceptual universe canon. The things that I always wanted to ask. So bit by bit, when I got the chance, when the door opened with the companion, and originally I was just trying to encyclopedia, a concordance, which and I did every year. But even doing that, I started, you know, corresponding with Mike Akuta and Rick Sternbach and a couple of the people on the writing staff, Richard Arnold when he was there, and then later on Eric Stillwell, who'd helped me with, you know, things as mundane as spelling, but and kind of an insight into just the way the show worked and the way a TV show works. So that when I got the chance to write the companion, and I had known Steve Whitfield's book, that was kind of my guiding yardstick, the classic Making of Star Trek, and then Bijo's Concordance. But I needed interviewing. I needed the behind-the-scenes information for the companion, and they wanted it like in 3 months and then 6 months. So I went back to my files and did some quickie interviewing, and but through all that and the interviewing I've done since in the magazines, it's basically I'm a fan. I take it as a fan who has an awareness of both performance and also the TV industry increasingly over the years. And it's like a three-legged stool. A lot of fans ask questions based just on, you know, gee, what color is Andorian blood? Well, of course it's blue, but I mean, yeah. But other questions, why did so-and-so happen? Well, if you know how the industry works, it's really because of this. Or if you knew the personalities at the time, this happened because of that, or this didn't happen because of that. So having an awareness of all three of that, I was able to bridge worlds and bring real journalism to fandom and an awareness of the industry. And I'd like to think a mix of all those three things was what guided me. But bottom line is, I just always asked the questions. I went to the topics that I, as a fan, wanted to know about. And I found out that over the years, a lot more. I wasn't an isolated 4 or 5 guys in a world of people all writing fanzines. Turns out there were a lot more people wanting to know that, or hadn't even thought to want to ask those questions, but they were thrilled someone was. So there you go. And that, and just respecting everybody in the industry, on the shows, and respecting fans both, and then getting in a professional position to you know, respect the writers that we hired and the artists and that kind of thing. It's what I've tried to always bring to, you know, just an honesty and respect to everything I do.
Now, moving on a little bit, you made a cameo appearance in the final episode of Enterprise as a ceremony guest. How did that come about?
Well, I had, you know, if people know me or they read my stuff or saw one of the shorts for Star Trek Phase 2 fan films, they know that I love the Tellarites. It's just always been a little funky thing. And I had wanted to play, as Enterprise was getting into the established aliens, the other races, and getting toward the founding of the Federation, they had some storylines with Tellarites. And I had told a couple of the ADs, as they have done this in the past, having little, you know, guest extras. And 2, this was 4th season of Enterprise. The show was winding down. People knew they were canceled. People were very much in the mood of, these are the last hours of Star Trek that might be produced for some time. So people are trying to get things in. And I had just told a couple of the assistant directors that I would love to be a Tellarite when you had a Tellarite scene. Well, I totally missed the Coalition of Planets, to Terra Prime, that 2-parter. I totally missed being in the ceremony there in the circle of delegates. So I missed being on a Tellarite. But Mike Demerit said, well, we've got a show coming up. We're going to have some extras. We're going to do some finale. We're going to do a scene in the finale where we're going to have a lot of guest extras. We can probably put you into that. And it started off as just 6 or 8 people, but you know, it's the sentimentality, and there was really a mood in March and April and May of 2005 around the lot of this is really the real deal. It's all about to end after 18 years, guys. Not Star Trek, but a big break, and who knows what's on the other side of the break, what's coming up. So they wound up expanding. You know, Rick Berman wound up allowing that audience scene of guest extras to wind up being like 30 people. So no, that was a hoot. And what's kind of crazy was I had a chance. You know, DS9 did the same thing the last day of filming on their finale in Vic's Lounge, and everybody in the audience, there's cast members, a lot of the alien actors out of makeup, all the stand-ins, the writers are all in that scene, a lot of the show staff, and I was kind of stupid and naive and didn't jump in and do the same thing then. And Ira later on was like, why didn't you do that then? And I'm like, I didn't know. And Voyager didn't really do a moment like that. So it was even though there's a lot of controversy about the last episode of Enterprise that's been acknowledged by Brannon Braga, on the writing bits of it, some of the episode is really cool. And Archer's speech and that scene with all those people, those guest extras, is kind of cool. So that was, and it was a cool day, as she did all the time. Majel came down with Rod on the last day of shooting all the shows to say hello and thank you to everyone. She, she's not involved at all in the day-to-day running of the shows, but when it's a kickoff and then when it's a finale, that was kind of a custom of hers. And she was still up and going in 2005, and she came down, and that was kind of a moment for everyone. There to see her and have her talk to the assembled cast and crew and all that larger than normal stage audience that day. So that was cool. And I have a lot of good, and then I hung on to the end so I wouldn't repeat the mistakes of the last day of DS9, and got a lot of, talked to a lot of people and did a lot of photography as that day went along. And just knew, when you had that sense of things are ending, and there's not another show coming along in the fall, we're not just cranking things out, that this is really it. You'd take advantage of it. So yeah, a lot of sweet and bittersweet memories come back from that time. Seeing all the within a 2 or 3 weeks, seeing all the sets crated up on the backs of trucks was kind of that was a bittersweet moment too.
I could only imagine what that must have been like.
Yeah.
Just to have all that there. Now, what I do have to ask, what did you think of these other voyages, the final Enterprise episode?
Well, I hated that they killed off Trip, and I know what Rick and Brannon were trying to do, and I think they've since realized that maybe it wasn't the best way to do it. And I remember even at the time, Jonathan and Marina were saying, we're kind of intruding on their space here, aren't we? We've had our time, and we're doing our movies. We did our movies. And it was on top of the bittersweetness of ending, then to have it be an ending that way. That was a vibe that what the fans' general reaction to the show was. That was already happening. It was already happening on the lot. That was happening on the sets too. And I mean, no one blamed Jonathan and Marina. That was the show was written, and they agreed to do the bit. But there was kind of and there was already a sense of the two-parter, where you wind up with the founding of the Coalition of Planets, and you have that nice sweeping shot of Archer and his crew, and they get their time, they get their spot in the spotlight, especially since their show is only running 4 seasons and not 7, which then you go back and realize the original series only ran 3, so Enterprise may not be as failed a show as people sometimes kick it onto the run. It's like we've come full circle in perception of Star Trek, because the original series was thought to be a failure in the industry, even though it went 3 years, and that meme. And then that's kind of been hung on Enterprise a little bit, except by, as Doug Drexler we talked about recently, aside from all the new fans who have come to Enterprise and don't know they're supposed to hate it, and they enjoy it. So there you go. But yeah.
What? I just wonder, Larry, whether it was almost writer's fatigue in the end, because there had been Star Trek on air continuously since 86, 87, that they just had gotten to a point where it was time for a break. And the 4th season was probably the best of Enterprise, and it was the last of Star Trek TV to be produced so far. But yeah, I just sort of feel that maybe it went on too long, and Paramount were trying to do too much.
Yeah, and I will give Rick Berman credit. That wasn't his doing. It was the studio. When you have a hot thing, unfortunately, the tendency in Hollywood and in a lot of industry is that when something hits hot, mine it to death. And I remember Rick used to say, I get worried that we go to the well one too many times. And I think one thing that people say, if nothing else, in hindsight, that as much as everyone loved Star Trek, the success of Next Generation begat not just one but two spin-offs at the same time. And I think people look back now and say, well, that may have been a mistake to divide the audience, as it were, because after the froth of the Next Generation, that huge success, the summer of '99, to have DS9 on and Voyager coming right behind, a lot of people wound up being fans of one or the other. A lot of people got into Voyager and they said, oh, well, DS9 doesn't go anywhere. It's that show that doesn't go anywhere, and I like my Star Trek to be exploring, and we've got to be on a ship going somewhere, and that's just too static for me. Where DS9 was really the, well, we look back now and say, my God, what a groundbreaker DS9 was, because they eventually got into, serialized episode storytelling, where the old meme of Star Trek was rooted in the syndicated stations after the main run, saying, no, don't give us connected stories. We want standalone shows so we can show them when we want to, and we don't have people yelling at us for not showing them in order. So that's, which had kind of governed all TV. That's why most TV was patterned the way it was. And now TV is patterned after selling a box of DVDs, and everybody wants those connected stories, and no one cares about how the stripped syndicated daily on a local station goes. So that's changed, but DS9 was that way. And what's amazing now is, thanks to the DVDs and thanks to Netflix, people are appreciating DS9 far more, not just for the post 9/11 themes that were so ahead of their time, but for that serialized storytelling as it gets a little more intense toward the end. But at the time, the perception was of live TV showing that the audience was dividing, and that maybe there was some fatigue. And I know they made a real huge effort with Enterprise to have a new concept, bring in some new people on staff, people that had worked for a long time, done a very good job, but just for some new blood. And maybe it was just too much to overcome. Maybe if they'd shaken up the staff, or maybe if Rick and Brandon had stepped back a little more and let more people run earlier on. It's all hindsight now, but
absolutely.
But it's sad that really the writing was on the wall. People look at the irony of Enterprise is that people go, how could you cancel it when the fourth season was getting so good? Well, the writing was on the wall, second season, and then for sure third season, and the fourth season was just an extra few episodes bought by the grace of God and the Paramount TV studio with UPN Network. They upped their budget, and they bought that last season to have about 100 shows. The old traditional syndicated, you got to have 100 shows to syndicate kind of meme. And, so it was like on borrowed time. And there wasn't an explosion in the ratings, so, they waited and waited, and it was sad. I remember they were doing part 2 of Inner Mirror Darkly when the word came down that, no, it's for sure, we're done. So from Inner Mirror Darkly 2 to the end of the season, those last 6 episodes or whatever, we're done under the knowledge that the show wasn't coming back and that all of modern Star Trek was going to be at an end, and no one knew what Star Trek was going to be. The perception was that people were tired of it. I think it was more about, they talked about franchise fatigue. I think it was more producer fatigue, to be honest, because that was right at the same point when you had all the fan films exploding and technology coming along, and people could do a movie on their laptop. And it was sad that we had that break. But the perception, not among fans, but among Hollywood and the suits and the people with money that ran the networks, was that Star Trek was old and tired and needed to go away and rest a while. And I don't know that that's totally true, but that's what we got.
And I think I actually remember 2005 was sort of the start for me to be online and on the internet, and discovering this whole universe, that there are a whole world of Star Trek fans out there and discussing it. And there's the forum Trek United, and they had the Save Enterprise campaign, and I remember that they actually pulled together $1 million for a 5th season, and that's sort of happening again. I know Doug Drexler's sort of involved with the Bring Back Enterprise campaign again. Do you see Enterprise returning for a 5th season, or if they were to go down the TV route again, they would do a whole new series?
Yeah. Well, welcome to some of fandom's current modern debate topics. What does new Star Trek in the future look like? It's really an intriguing idea. And just to clarify, what Doug is doing, has lent his name to, was a campaign that got started after Arrested Development came back as a Netflix series. And again, the whole concept of Netflix doing original programming
I just wish we had it down here in Australia.
Yeah, but I mean, and it blew people's minds this year because you had Emmy nominations for Kevin Spacey's series House of Cards, which was not on a network or a cable network. It was on Netflix, and it was a quality show that garnered Emmy nominations, and that that blew people away. So. Just here again, here's the concept of something new. Just as syndication was, as the cable networks have been over time. The other thing that's interesting that would have maybe retold the story about the Enterprise meme, the current thinking. Just like with the original series, the old thing was, well, they were never hit the ratings, and if we'd had demographics back then, instead of just raw numbers, that the original series would have been looked at as not a ratings loser, and NBC might have renewed it. And there's been new research and new Nielsen's uncovered by author Mark Cushman in his These Are the Voyages book, where Star Trek, the original series, was winning its hour or its half hours, number 1 or number 2 in the slots all the time. It was just NBC got crossways with Gene and just wanted to get rid of him finally. We're tired of envelope stretching. And there's a little bit about that with Enterprise. Back during Enterprise's run, people weren't giving a lot of credence to, DVRing and the time-shifting ratings. And, Enterprise was on a crippled little network. What people don't realize is the fact of actual viewers, the first year of Ron Moore's, rebooted Battlestar Galactica on Sci-Fi Network here was the last year of Enterprise. So they overlapped a year. And the perception was that Enterprise was kind of limping home and got canceled, whereas Galactica was this huge new series that exploded on the stage and everybody loved it, and that's all very true. But in raw numbers, Enterprise was actually it was a big fish in a small pond. Enterprise was a large fish in a small pond, and I'm mixing my metaphors. The point is, Enterprise was still getting 1 million more actual viewers a week than Galactica was in its debut season. But the perception was that Galactica was this huge hit, and Enterprise was this, the air was going out of the balloon rapidly. So the perception there was that was the ratings. But what was being discounted at the time was the amount of people TiVoing or DVRing Enterprise. And it was like one of the top 5 shows that was happening to. Now people give a lot more credence to the DVR recording of shows. And they factor that into popularity and the whole money end of it, because money's what's fueling all this. So that's a perceptional thing that's changed now too. So a new Star Trek, the Netflix campaign is kind of a mind-blowing thing to be on Netflix. The idea that all the cast would come back and do it, it hasn't been that long. Some of the sets may still be in existence, that they might just green screen some of the lesser used sets and some of the planets. That technology is available. That's all really interesting. Whether CBS would let go of it. Hasn't it? Sorry?
It's gotten so much better. The green screen technology, the CGI effects. It's not. You don't require thousands of or millions of dollars of computer server farm equipment to get stuff done. You can use a domestic home computer and render out pretty good.
Well, there's a lot of programs where, like, instead of having me really looking out over the observatory here in LA, that they would actually just put insert a picture behind me. So
exactly.
So given the it's only been 7-8 years.
Welcome to Trekzone Dog Interviews. We're in Perth for Oz Comic Con. Nana Visitor is to my right. Nana, thanks so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure.
Welcome to Australia. It's not your first time here.
No, I was here, it has to be 18 years ago, because I was heavily pregnant with my son Django, who's now 17 years old.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, for 7 years, you came into our homes as Major, then Colonel Kira on DS9. What was that like, that experience?
The most amazing part of that experience is what's going on right here, that 20 years later, I'm still talking about it and enjoying it with people, and going to different countries where I have something in common with a whole group of you, you know, and meeting new people. That's the most extraordinary part.
Now, DS9 was the most diverse Star Trek. It explored a lot more darker sort of elements than the Star Trek before it. Do you have any feelings towards Deep Space Nine's storytelling?
I loved and love and respect our writers, and I didn't know that it was dark, but a truthful shade of gray that sometimes you couldn't call it who was right and who was wrong. Things didn't always have a clean button, you know, to tidily end things. And that's so much more truthful to life.
And it really reflected the times as well. Like Next Generation in the 80s was very hopeful and optimistic about the future, but Deep Space Nine in the 90s sort of brought it back to reality, and that's the world we live in, is this shade of grey.
Right.
And having Kira as a non-human, being a Bajoran, she was able to actually explore more human elements, I guess.
Absolutely.
So that she could be the sort of moral compass for Cisco.
Well, that's the great thing about science fiction. It gives us just a little bit of remove so that we can take a good long look at ourselves.
So you said you love coming, 20 years later, here you are still talking about it.
Yeah.
It's been off the air it's been 15 years now.
Yeah, but still on the air.
What does the Star Trek journey mean for you as a whole? Coming out of it all and being part of this massive franchise, did you feel anything like that? Is this big adventure?
As an actor, you can only hope for a character that takes your hand and leads you into scary places, emotionally, psychologically, and intellectually. And Kira was that for me. I wanted her desperately the minute I read the script, and that I got to play her was just one of the best things of my life. And it's not even a career thing. I mean, 7 years is an amazingly long part of your life, and it was a really important part of mine. I had my children, they grew up. Django, when he was 4, someone asked him, "Where are you from? What city are you from?" And he said, "Star Trek Los Angeles." And that's kind of, that experience, that's how it was. It wasn't just my job, it was my life.
And it becomes a family, doesn't it? 7 years, as you say, is a long time. And you're working with all these people for 12 hours a day for most of the year.
16 and up. 16 and up hours a day.
Our union's better.
Yeah, yes. Oh, yes.
But yeah, it's something that I've found with the few interviews that I've done, is that sci-fi shows are more sort of become more of a family than, say, perhaps other shows. Maybe because they last so much longer, and there is a bigger, more loyal fan base.
Well, and there's another thing too that you don't really consider. You're in makeup a long time, and you're very vulnerable and truthful at 4 a.m. And when you're sitting with a bunch of people, for hours at a time, it's very different than a lot of other television shows or even movies Although it's easy to get tight on a movie set too when you're in another city or something. You know, you band together.
Now, aside from Star Trek, you also played a role on, and let's see if my memory serves, because my notes are back in the boardroom. It was on James Cameron's show, Dark Angel?
Dark Angel.
Yes. Yes!
Yeah. Loved that.
How was that compared to DS9? Obviously, it didn't have as long a run, but what was that like?
It was rough and ready in the sense that, you know, it was being on the docks and grabbing bits and pieces here and there, and it was not on the set at Paramount, but it was really exciting to do yet another character that was thought out for a long run. Unfortunately, the network got involved and changed the main thrust of the show, so you didn't really get to know everything, why I was the way I was. And that's a shame. But James Cameron was lovely and smart, and I thought it was so well written.
Coming to these conventions, have you had any crazy adventures? I always like to ask my guests if they've had any crazy adventures with fans that have met you at signing tables and stuff like that. Any standouts?
You know, I have to say that the weird things, it's like 1% of the experience. For the most part, even the people who are dressed up, you know, people on the outside have their thoughts about all of that, although with cosplay, I think people are getting more used to the idea that it's just fun to enter another, you know, reality with the way you dress. But they are smart people and thoughtful, and I've always enjoyed them. There's a group of people that I met around the world, that I'm genuinely friends with and keep up with, and you know, we talk to each other regularly. I have someone here, Wendy, that I can't wait to see her. Can't wait to see her. Haven't seen her in a while.
Oh, fantastic.
So, you know, I get to see old friends.
That's fantastic. Well, Nana, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
And, thanks for coming out for Oz Comic Con, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Look forward to are you coming?
I will be there, yes.
Excellent.
Another Trekzone.org interviews for Oz Comic Con in Perth. Connor Trenier is with me. Connor, thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Welcome to Perth.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, this isn't your first time. You've been here before.
I was here a few years ago, yeah.
Fantastic. It's a beautiful city.
It's a lovely city, yeah. I like Perth.
Best one in Australia, I reckon.
You think? You from here?
I am a Perth boy, based in Brisbane at the moment, but yeah.
It better be, because it's far away.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why it's so lovely.
Yeah.
Because it's far away from all that other rubbish.
Right.
Now, for 4 years, you graced our TV screens as Trip Tucker III, the chief engineer on the first Enterprise. What was that like?
It was great. I mean, I had not, previous to that, had, you know, any sort of role that was that expansive. But I also hadn't had a role that was that important. I had no idea that that part was going to be what it was. When I got the part, I thought I was Scotty, basically, you know, being the engineer. I thought, gosh, you know, I'm going to work for a couple of days and a week, and then, you know, have 3 days off, learn how to surf, do whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I opened up that pilot script and I was like, oh boy, I'm in this, man. I'm in this. Nobody told me I was part of this triumvirate with the captain and T'Pol. So that was nice to know once I found out myself and the pilot. But yeah, you know, I don't think you get, as an actor, a lot of opportunities to play parts like that. And I just feel, you know, very fortunate that I did, and I got I got so much rope to hang myself with, as they say, you know. So it was fantastic. It was fantastic. I wish it had gone. I think we all do, you know, longer than 4 years, but hey ho, that's the actor's life for me. You know,
Yeah.
you lose jobs all the time.
I think that's it's almost every Star Trek series has always had a rough beginning to life. You know, like Next Generation, it took 2 seasons, or Next Generation and DS9 took 2 seasons to really get going. Voyager took 7. That's personal opinion. But, you know, I mean, Enterprise really got there in the 4th season with Manny Koto coming aboard and delivering the 3-parters and the 2-parters there to really establish a lot of the Star Trek history that we knew. And it was all happening with you at the forefront. Did you feel any pressure at the time?
No, you know, when the show started, I think it was episode 3 where I was unexpected, the one where I was pregnant in, and you know that was
great episode,
listen, that was thank you, that was a lot to chew on, you know. So I kind of felt like they were throwing some stuff out there to see how I would handle it, and I had a lot of, you know, big archy kind of things happening to me over the course of time, and by the time we got to the 4th season, I knew my role. I knew how to do it. I knew, you know, what kind of effort and work and homework it took to get it done. So, no, I didn't really find it to be any more taxing than the rest of it had, you know.
Season 3 was a big departure from Star Trek before, doing a season-long arc about the hunt for the Xindi weapon.
Yeah.
That was it was almost the beginning of the departure of Gene's Star Trek in a certain sort of way, and it also put Trip on a bit of a character spiral for him, losing his sister in the season 2 finale. Do you feel that that sort of grew the character and helped you into the role more often? And there was another episode with Similitude where you played a clone of yourself. So there's all these episodes. How do you think Trip grew?
And that season, you know, season 3 was at best a thinly veiled reaction to 9/11. So we were all really kind of going through how all that had, you know, manifested itself in us throughout the year, and the writers were, the directors were, the producers were, what have you, and so it's hard. I don't have a lot of like independent memories of that year so much as sort of like a wash of kind of how we all just got through it, you know, and not in a negative way, but just in a way of sort of, you know, the world, something's happening in the world, and we're all sort of coming to terms with that, whereas we were actually doing that, you know, in a storytelling capacity on our show. So in all honesty, it was kind of therapeutic for me, at least, you know. I mean, I got to sort of sort through some stuff.
And I think that's sort of what Star Trek is, you know, looking at it in that way, in that it is a reaction to, or a discussion about real world events. As you say, it was a reaction, sort of a reaction to 9/11, a big catastrophe, a big horrible incident that sends people on a path. That's really Star Trek. In a way. Now, moving on, after Enterprise, you joined another big sci-fi franchise at Stargate, and you're our favourite Wraith in the Miller household. Michael.
Christopher Heyerdahl won't want to hear that.
What was that like, joining almost a sort of a rival sci-fi show, coming aboard and taking on this really cool character?
I don't think anybody in the acting side, the show side, thinks of it like that at all. You know, what I liked about it was, you know, Trip was the light and Michael was the dark, and you know, we all have those facets of our psyches and personalities. So I really enjoyed, if that's the right word for it, kind of exploring that side of, because I've never gotten a chance to play anything like that before, and you know, I didn't audition for it. They offered it to me, and I mean, I don't know that I would have gotten it had I auditioned for it, but I was able to, build from the ground up this character, and that's always really what you hope to do and what you look for, and and in terms of the experience, I mean, they weren't dissimilar. I mean, everybody on that set, really got along very well, and you're working long hours because of the sorts of things that you have to deal with the CGI and the whatever. It just takes a long time, and my role took 3.5 hours of makeup. So whereas with Trip, it was 15 minutes of a little bit of coverage spray, and I was out of there. And this was and it was, I think, beneficial for me, because you get there at 4:30 in the morning, and Michael was nowhere to be found in my head at that time. So they begin to, over that period, he starts to show up on my face, and then you get to kind of like, I don't know, meditate on it, I guess, because you're sitting in that chair and they're putting it all on you, and then you throw the costume on, and and you get there and you look at yourself in the mirror, and then you're kind of set in, you're locked in, and then they throw the eyes on, and it was interesting because it literally changed the way I saw, because they were cat-eye contacts, so all my peripheral vision was gone. So I looked at the world in a whole different way, and yeah, it was a great experience. I would like to have seen where he would have gone, because I think there were plans for him had they, again, carried on with their show. But no, I got a lot of. It was a lot of fun.
So you're the common link. No, I'm kidding.
To
show's ending. No, I'm kidding.
Could be.
Enterprise. No,
could be.
No, not at all.
I'm Hemlock.
But did you feel anything coming into this family, the Atlantis family? Were you welcomed with open arms into the Atlantis family when you came aboard as Michael?
Yeah, I mean, maybe more in a sense that I was coming from an entrenched world of sci-fi, and they knew my work really well, and I don't know this for a fact. I don't think that the role was meant to be more than an episode, but I could tell over the course of that week that their wheels were spinning about how to carry this on, and because nobody had said to me, "You're coming back." Well, nobody had said to me when I got the part that this is going to be a recurring thing. They had just then they said, "Oh yeah, we're bringing you back," and then I would never know from year to year when that would happen. They would just call up, and if I was available, and I'd do 1 or 2 episodes at a crack, and just sort of go from there.
Well, fantastic, Connor. Thanks so much for coming out to Perth, coming out for Oz Comic Con, and for having a chat with us here on Trekzone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Cheers. Trekzone.org interviews Supernova in Brisbane. Grant Imahara, welcome to Brisbane and Australia.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming out.
Absolutely.
Now, you were one of the co-hosts on Mythbusters.
Yes.
And you've also done some work in some Star Trek fan fiction as well.
Yeah.
How did you get started in all of that?
Well, Mythbusters came about because my friends Adam and Jamie got the show, and they needed help. And so, we had all been working together for a number of years, and so when they needed help, they looked towards their friends who also happen to have all the right skills. As far as Star Trek Continues goes, the life force behind that show, Vic Mignogna, we had met at another convention a number of years ago, and we happened to be at a party. And Vic said, "Oh yeah, hey Grant, I've got this Star Trek project, and let me just show you some pictures of our bridge." And he's showing me the pictures of the bridge, and I must have been drooling or something. He's like, "Yeah, we haven't really cast Sulu yet. We're still looking for someone." So I'm like, "Well, Vic, if you need any help, let me know." And so he called 3 days later and said, Grant, would you be my Sulu? And I said, yes.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So was it like a dream come true?
Oh, it's better than a dream come true. I mean, I grew up watching reruns of Star Trek, the original series, and George Takei was one of the few Asian American role models on TV at that time. I mean, most of the time, if you see an Asian guy on TV, he's like a gangster or a thug or some other type of bad guy. And here, Sulu is not only part of the core crew, he's not only a hero, he's flying the ship. So it's
groundbreaking in so many ways there with Nichelle, on the bridge, Sulu on the bridge, and so an amazing series.
At a time where racial stereotypes were rampant, and so to get the opportunity to not only play that character, but wear the world's most accurate uniform made by Novos on the world's most accurate full-scale Enterprise set. And I'm not just talking the bridge. We've got the captain's quarters, the transporter room, sick bay, conference room. I mean, we've got everything.
It's an absolutely amazing production.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're also working on Renegades as well.
Yes. Yeah, I got contacted by a friend of a friend. They're like, hey, Tim Russ, Tuvok, is directing this thing. Are you interested? And I said, absolutely. Because, it's got Walter Koenig in it. And to be able to work with Chekhov, who he's reprising his role as Admiral Chekhov in this show, like, I jumped at the chance. Of course I want to do it, so.
And, I mean, you started going back a little bit, you started at ILM, and you worked on the prequel movies, as well as many other things.
Yeah.
Your best highlight from working at ILM?
Oh, there's so many things. I mean, getting to work on R2-D2. In addition to being a Star Trek fan, I was a huge Star Wars fan growing up. I had the bed sheets, I had the lunchbox, I had the action figures, and so getting to work on the R2-D2 units that are used in the movies now is just another dream come true. And of course, for me, I think my favorite movie of all time that I've worked on is Galaxy Quest. Because, a lot of the movies we did at ILM were huge blockbusters, but some of them weren't that great of a movie, whereas Galaxy Quest is both great technically, and it's a great comedy, and it's just an all-around really fun movie.
And with Tim Allen in the lead, you really can't go wrong, can you?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, we're going to wrap this up. So very quickly, and again, back to Renegades, what can we look forward to in that series? It's coming up in the next year or so, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been waiting for a while for Renegades, because we filmed it many, many months ago. And Renegades is a really cool story. It's, they're called Renegades because there's, without giving away too many spoilers, there's a secret mission. And so in order to complete the mission, they can't officially do it through regular Starfleet channels. And so that's where they find the Renegades, this ragtag crew. So it's a great story, and I can't wait to see it.
Fantastic. Well, Grant, thanks so much for coming out to Australia and checking in with us here at Supernova, and look forward to Renegades.
All right, thanks a lot.
Trekzone.org interviews Supernova in Brisbane with Tori Higginson. Welcome to Australia. Is this your first time?
No, I've been to Australia a bunch of times. You guys love sci-fi. It's awesome. My first time here was almost 10 years ago, and I think we did Sydney and Brisbane. And since in the last 10 years, I've been to Melbourne a few times and Sydney, and Adelaide just last week. Yeah, I love it here.
So you obviously were Dr. Elizabeth Weir on Stargate Atlantis, the follow-up, yes, the follow-up to SG-1. Now you did do 3 episodes in the SG-1 franchise, and I always ask Stargate actors and actresses, what was it like working with the 3 greatest names in television?
The 3 greatest names in television.
Richard Dean Anderson.
Oh, look at you.
We're still waiting for his appearance on the website.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, he'll next time he comes through, I'm sure he'll do it. I love him. He's a very irreverent and warm earthling. I like him very much. But I was very nervous, and I actually hadn't watched a lot of SG-1, but I knew him from MacGyver. So our first scenes together, I was kind of nervous and shy around him. I'll get it.
Phone's going off in the media room, but that's okay. That's okay.
So I was really nervous in front of him, but he's just adorable and just wonderful, and he's very, very cheeky. And I always tell this story about how, because I was brought up in Britain, and well, not brought up in Britain, but my parents are British, and I had a lot of that influence. I use the word bugger in a way that Americans don't use the word bugger. Yes, yep. And I was nervous, and I dropped a line, and I was so embarrassed, and I went, oh, bugger me, and he didn't miss a beat. He grabbed me, threw me against the wall, looked at the camera, said, still rolling? My face was so red for like a week. I'm like, oh my God, that was embarrassing. But he's very lovely.
And then, so you moved from Richard Dean Anderson to working with John Shepherd on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. Joe Flanagan. Wow. Yes, that just happened. That just happened.
It's the convention mentality, right? There's just these lights and so many people. I actually yesterday was signing an autograph, and I said, what's your name? And they said, Ben. I said, I wrote, to Tori. I'm like, what's going on? Yeah, so I get it.
So yes.
You're forgiven.
And so every day, almost every day for the first 3 years, what was that like? Was he better than Richard Dean Anderson?
Are you asking me? It sounds like it's like who was better? I don't kiss and tell. If I was lucky enough to kiss either of them, I still wouldn't tell. Yeah, no, they're very, very different energies, very different people, and they're both lovely and just. Yeah, but I was sort of more in awe of Richard Dean because I had known his career beforehand, whereas Joe I just met on the show, and also because I didn't work with him on a daily basis. So, you get that sort of casual thing that happens when you're working on a daily basis.
Was it a great vibe on set on Atlantis?
Yeah, usually, but I always say it's like it does become family. I mean, you work together so much, and you're working such hours that you don't have much of a social life outside of the working. So like a family, right? There's days that it's awesome. There's days that you want to wring their necks. You're like, oh my God, really? You're doing that? But I loved it, and that's what I miss the most. I mean, other than the paycheck, when the jobs are over, I really miss playing that character, which is something I don't usually feel in the few series that I've done. I've done 3 series, and the first 2, when I left them, I didn't miss the character. I missed the people, but this one I missed the people and I missed the character. So I thought that was a testament to the character that they created, which was nice.
You got demoted in the 4th season and disappeared in the 5th.
Was that so humbling? Did it suck?
Did it suck? Yeah, let's just cut to the chase.
Yeah, did it suck? Of course, it always sucks. I mean, it's funny in hindsight because when they offered me the show, I was at a time in my career where I didn't want a series. I'd already done 2 series, and I wanted to expand, and I wanted to do different things. I was sort of new to LA too, and I thought, oh no, maybe I can get into movies. Is what everybody wants to do. So at first, I was sort of, I don't know if I want to sign off, and they wanted us to sign a 6-year contract, and I was kind of balking, and I had my agent fight with them for about a week to say, can we get it to 3 years? And they said, absolutely not, you got to sign. So I sort of found it funny that 3 years in, they said, because I did sign a 6-year contract, and they said, well, we could either write you out now or you could be recurring. And I sort of laughed and said, don't tell the gods what you want. Like, okay, thanks guys. But I wanted that then. Now I'm actually enjoying the job, enjoying the character. So it sucked, but it also, I understood it. I felt that there was also a changing of the reins, like when Brad left and Joe Maloney, who I adore, and I adore their writing when they took over, but they wanted to make it their own, so they wanted to change the vibe of it a bit more. And I did feel that they weren't utilizing this character. They're paying me as the lead, and I was yet, separate from that group of people. So they were working 5 days a week, and I would come in and shoot my scenes in an afternoon pretty much and take off. So I think financially it made no sense for them to have me there, because the way they were shooting, they weren't utilizing her. And creatively, I felt, if you're going to be somewhere, you want to be utilized. You want to be working. I don't want to get paid for just half a day. I want to actually work. I like working. Actors like to work. So, however, it's disappointing. I still got it. I understood why. How's that for roundabout?
Love it. Now, did you realize at the time of joining Atlantis that being an actor on a sci-fi series would bring you into this sort of environment, fans and conventions and non-stop PRing for a show that's off air?
Right, that's the weird part, because we also have bad memories. No, I didn't realize that at all, and it was the funniest thing, because we were still shooting the show, and they asked us to do San Diego Comic-Con, and I'd never done, San Diego, I'd never done any conventions. So my very first convention was San Diego Comic-Con, and the show hadn't been on the air, and all we knew so far was there was a lot of hate websites about us, because I think a lot of the SG-1 fans were worried we were going to take over their show. So there was
Which you did do in the end.
Which, yeah, I guess kind of did, but didn't really.
Not really.
No, they all had a master plan. We were all just pawns in their big game. So they took us down to this place, and so we knew there's a lot of hate towards us, but nobody had seen the show. And they said, you've got to do this panel tomorrow morning. And we got there Friday night, and the studio's there. They took us out for free dinner. Actors, you give actors free anything. We're going to take it, because when we work, and when we don't, we don't. So when it's free, we're going to take it. So we had this fantastic free dinner, free wine, more wine, free cocktails, more free wine. Needless to say, the next morning, we were all really hungover, felt nauseous. Like, my poor boyfriend at the time, he was looking at me, he's like, you can't go on stage, you look awful. Like, I was just sort of gray. And they had us behind this door. They said, you're gonna walk in, there'll be an entrance, a little video, and you'll go up on stage. And we thought, okay, the show's not being on air. There'll be maybe 20, 30 people. We'll get through this. They opened the door. There was like a football field of people. Wow. This room was packed. It was shocking. So that was a shocking first moment and I couldn't string a sentence together. I was so hungover. So we all just sat there looking sort of gray and looking out going, oh my God, what has our life become? So it was kind of wonderful in retrospect that was the slap in the face of look at this new world. And at first I hated conventions because I found them, I'm a private person, and I found them overwhelming. I love them now. I love them, not only because I get to travel, but as an actor doing theater, so I ramble so much. Sometimes ask me one question, I'll talk for an hour.
Go for it.
As an actor, I'm used to doing theater, so you know your audience, you have a relationship with your audience. And television, I missed that, and these conventions are fabulous because you get to meet people and go, oh, you're who I do this for. Oh, and you get to hear what they get out of what you're doing and what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, and there's something about a sci-fi audience. Joe did say that you can't beat a sci-fi audience.
Oh my gosh, you guys they're amazing, like so loyal and wonderful and supportive. I just did a one-person play up in Canada last year, and the director, she went and did a Kickstarter for it. We got funded by people from all over the world that weren't even going to be able to see it because it was theater. Yeah. But they just wanted to support me and support that creativity, and I was so moved and amazed by that. And you guys also, the Stargate fans, no offense to Star Trek, but the Stargate fans are known as being the most generous for raising money for charities. Wow. They raise more money for charities than any other fan group. They're unbelievable.
Well, there you go. Tori, have you got any work coming up?
I've got my fingers crossed. I've been invited to be a part of the Sci-Fi Theater Festival in Los Angeles this year, which I'm really excited about because it's all in the words and it's all in the character. And I also just shot a web series this summer called Nobility that James Kyson was in. We got Christopher Judge to be a part of it. Awesome. Kaz Anvar got in touch with me and said, I'd love Christopher to play this part. Can you give him a call? I called him, he was great. I said, there's no money, but there's all these possibilities and there's a great cast and a great concept, and do you want to come play? And he didn't miss a beat. He said, yeah, sure, I'd love to come play. Awesome. So, and we got Walter Koenig in it, we got Doug Jones, we've got this really, really great cast, so fingers crossed something's going to come of that.
Fantastic. Well, Tori, thanks so much for having a chat, and enjoy the rest of Supernova.
Thank you very much.
Jan? Jan? Where's our ad in the Yellow Pages directory?
Keep calm. Count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10.
Not happy, Jan!
Cheap health insurance, meerkats, two very different things. Listen there, jingle. Listen mine.
CompareTheMeerkat.com.au.
Don't even sound same. For compare meerkats, come to CompareTheMeerkat.com.au. For easy way to find good health insurance deal, please go to CompareTheMarket.com.au. Simples.
Come in and see the good guys. Pay cash and we'll slash the prices. Come in and see the good guys. We'll give you a good price. Come in and see the good guys.
Get it for a song at the Good Guys. Pay less, pay cash.
Bluemobile will come to you.
Tell me more, Bluemobile.
On 133032.
Tell me more, Bluemobile.
Bluemobile can do lots.
Or more offers on the spot.
There's just one thing you need to do.
On 133032.
For everything mechanical, we've got it.
They'll fix the car.
Bluemobile will come to you. 133032.
That's 133032.
Barbara welcomes another customer into her bank world.
What? You said I should open this everyday account because it had no monthly account fees?
No need to thank me.
I'm not. Look at all these.
Ah, yeah, you see, when I said no monthly account fees, it was no with a silent K, as in you may not know about the fees until the fees are charged. Your mistake.
If I had realised about these fees, I never would have opened it to begin with.
Okay, to avoid any further confusion on your part, let me make myself 100% clear. We prefer that no customers may know what we know about what fees they're being charged until we know that it's too late for them to say no.
I didn't understand a word you just said.
Go away.
Barbara lives in bank world, but we live in your world.
Welcome to ANZ.
Where, with an ANZ Access Advantage account, what you see is what you get.
It's been a tumultuous fortnight for many Star Trek fans and former Star Trek employees. On February 24, Maurice Hurley, the man who introduced us to the Borg, passed away. Then Leonard Nimoy's battle with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease ended after a lengthy battle on the 27th. And on Wednesday, Harve Bennett, although we're now hearing that that was a week earlier, Harve Bennett, the producer behind such great movies as The Wrath of Khan, The Voyage Home and The Final Frontier, also passed away. Joining me via Skype for his thoughts is Larry Nemecek, noted Trek author, editor, archivist, consultant, producer and actor. Larry, it's certainly been a rough couple of weeks. Thanks for joining me.
Yes, it's been a rough, over a week here now, both as fans and as people who are concerned that people's legacies move on in the Star Trek world and in the pop culture world, as we saw the reaction to Leonard Nimoy's passing. The NASA reaction was not a surprise because Star Trek and NASA have always had a mutually beneficent love affair because they're both about the same thing, only on different sides of the coin. But the mainstream, President Obama is, we widely know he's the first president Trekkie. But it just shows you the length and breadth of where Star Trek has affected more and more of the culture as we've gone along down the road. So, and then to have Harve lost this last week, or at least get the word that he had passed away, was just adding more to it and set us all off on a lot of reflection, I think.
I've got a few friends that aren't massive Trekkies, so they're not as affected by Maurice's and Harv's passing, but they were very much a part of Star Trek, and without them, Trek as we know it wouldn't be what it is, would it?
Well, right. Well, certainly with Leonard, because after Gene creating the character, you'd have to say that it's and Spock being there even from the cage, in his younger yelly self. But as it evolved and through the early episodes, and Naked Time kind of being an early key one, and then what Dorothy Fontana as a writer did for Spock too in the mix. But yeah, Leonard obviously leading the way and creating a lot of, even more so than what was originally figured, because the show was set up to be a lead, second banana, and a bunch of other people. And first Leonard bursts out of the box to be to be a co-star with Kirk. And that first year, that was a little bit of friction as they got it sorted, and the agents and the actors and everybody got their mindset adjusted. And then D. Kelly managed to make Dr. McCoy such an integral part of the show, and you come up with the triad where it's like what do they say, the head and the heart, and then the soul, or the action man, or whatever, however you want to break Star Trek down, the popularity, and analyze it. But but that's been a comfortable fit for all the years and all through the movies. Leonard wishing he was not saddled with Spock, loving Spock, but wanting to be more than just Spock with his life, and then doing that. 3 Men and a Baby, Equus, all the other movies he directed, the projects he did, his photography, and feeling comfortable enough in his own skin to where he really could double down on embracing Spock and enjoying the fans and enjoying Shatner and Dee and kidding around and being very proud of his photography and his family and all that. And fans kind of, unless you were really close to Leonard, forget about a lot of those things. But
I've just started watching, because I'm rewatching all of the episodes to build the Trekzone.org database, reviewing them and doing screen caps and that sort of stuff. And I've just started, in tribute to Leonard, started season 2 of the original series. And now, believe it or not, for someone that runs a Star Trek fan site in Australia and has been doing so for 12 years, I've never seen past season 1 of the original series. What I found immediately, watching Amok Time, and it goes back to what you just said, that they settled down into these roles and they became, it really seemed that was the episode where there were the three of them, and it was Kirk, Spock and McCoy that we know today, and that carried through all the way through to generations. It was always the three of them.
Yeah, it was rapidly settling into that, and a lot of that was Gene Kuhn being involved also, as well as Dorothy Fontana, but who died in 1973 and wasn't around to see any of the future glory that Star Trek became, much less how the franchise grew into all the movies and the spin-off series, the sequel series. But even the end of the first season there, when you had, even though they were split up, but they were kind of feeling triad-y with City on the Edge of Forever. And even Operation Annihilate, they're working as a trio there. So, that was the seeds of that were very much coming to fruition. And by then they knew that not only, there was a time there when Leonard's manager was holding out for more money, saying, look how popular he is. The fan mail is out through the roof. The fan reaction is incredible. Shatner was the lead of the show, and there was a little bit of a mindset change, as there would be with any actor who was excited to be the lead of a show and have a breakout in the cast, sharing time with that. But there was room under the guidance of how they would sketch out the characters. There's only one captain, and then everybody loved Dee so much, and the fit for McCoy was such a natural fit in what he and Leonard had in the Spock McCoy banner, was just, and how early on in Amok Time they write the scene where you think it's going to be Kirk and Spock again, and he says, I want McCoy to accompany me, and he says, I would be honored, sir. Like right there, you hate to call it a duel, because they're really, they're like wonderful battling friends that love, arguing of the bar bet or whatever kind of. That's why I really love the second season as kind of the mature, I call it the mature season, before things got a little cheap and under the gun with the third season, and things were still raw and exciting in the first, but they weren't quite as mature as characters and as a concept as it got to be.
That set the mold for Star Trek. throughout the 4 series that would come. It would always be, it wouldn't just be the captain and his subordinates, it'd always be the captain, the first officer, and sometimes another one. In TNG it was Data, in DS9,
Right.
you're going to stretch me here, but so on and so forth. It became this thing, and that was the formula of Star Trek, and I think that's what made it so good, was that it was storylines, but it was also relationships.
Well, if the movies became much more about the family, the band of brothers, not to be sexist, brothers and sisters. And, TV, by the time of The Next Generation, TV had changed out of that lead, second banana, but the ensemble show. When Bochco did, Hill Street Blues and then LA Law, the ensemble show was the going thing. And so for them to trot out 9 characters or whatever it was, 8 characters on Next Generation at the beginning, wasn't daunting. There was obviously still a captain. There was a first officer, but they all found their way. Worf did, and Data did, and Data was early, but Troy eventually, and Troy and Riker, and Troy and Worf, and Crusher came and left and came back, and the girls were together, and Wesley was, so it, and then all the other
Don't get started on Wesley.
DS9.
Wesley's a whole other can of fish.
Yeah. But DS9 and Voyager and Enterprise all had that TV had changed. Just like people now, when they speculate about a new series, talk about the trends in TV production and format and storytelling, from number of episodes to what level of TV, premium channel or a cable channel, 10, 13 shows a year, 20, and then how they'd format the show, or even if it'll be one of the shows where, like American Horror Story or some of the other Fargo, where the cast and situation change, and maybe one year it's characters on a ship, one year it's a bunch of Klingons in a family battle, one year it's on some outpost somewhere with different characters each year. So who knows what the next one will be? But the brilliant thing about Next Gen was that it busted the universe open, where it's still Star Trek and they still have those shared elements, but now you're in a different corner of the Gene Roddenberry Star Trek sandbox.
Just going back to Beverly Crusher, she left in season 2, came back in season 3. I've been reading some reports online that was Maurice had a bit of a say in that. Is that true? Is that sort of how it happened?
Yeah, that was apparently where the friction was. They weren't really keen to talk about it, but basically there was an issue there, and not so much with Gene or with Bob Justman or Rick Berman. And in the pecking order of the time there, Rick was just into his first year and Bob had just retired. But when Hurley left at the end of the second year with the writer's strike going on, and that's the reason that the clip show is there, is Shades of Grey is there, because he wrote a clip show to get out, as soon as he could. But he did wait long enough to sit down and entertain some new try to interview people to take over for him as the showrunner. Michael Wagner came in, who only lasted for 2 or 3 shows. Apparently he didn't get along with Gene. Or, there were a lot of hassles trying to write Star Trek, especially back then. Now people have gotten it. It's more permeated the culture, but it was really hard. Even award-winning writers, Frank Abatamarco in the 5th season that wound up writing Chain of Command about torture, it was hard for a lot of writers to come in and, do the Roddenberry rules, they called it. Work in that tight, everybody's perfect. The drama comes from outside. I mean, just as a writer who's used to structuring conflict that way, and and getting used to the science fiction aspects. But anyway, but Michael Piller had been talked about just after they'd hired Michael Wagner, and then when he left, through 2 or 3 shows into the season, with the show already zooming along, Michael jumped aboard this speeding train. And wrestled it. I'm mixing my metaphors so horribly here, but he jumped aboard this runaway, stagecoach and got the horses under control, and it was insane. But by the middle of the year, they had things under control, and then ended up the year with Best of Both Worlds. So yeah, and when Maury Hurley was no longer in the picture, they had the choice of, well, do we go to and Diana Muldaur did not really want to come back. That wasn't turning out as well as they'd hoped. So. it was like, well, do we have a third Doctor in 3 years, or do we reach out to Gates now that everybody else here has no problem with that? And they did. And of course, then you got to reinforce the mom and son relationship again and go back to the Picard Crusher dynamic and all that. So yeah. But Maury Hurley did looked around and saw how cyborg sci-fi was, where Blade Runner and a lot of that had gone, and came up with the Borg. And we will always have Maury Hurley to thank for that.
He really was the father of the Borg.
Yeah, I mean, it was a trend in science fiction, and he was just very smart and said, well, how can we, the idea of the hive mind, that was originally the little beasties from Conspiracy, which were in the day, if that had been done 20 years later, it would have been so much cooler because they could have CGI'd them. But they had the little stop motion things that were almost a little hard to believe, or they were just bordering on the laughable, which as an effects person, you never want to have that happen, right? So, but between that and the reaction they got from some quarters about the exploding head, which was one of the coolest things they'd done to that point, and they got letters and they were told to bring it back. So between those two aspects, they never went back to those guys, those little creatures, which would have been interesting. But that was what Hurley wanted to go back to, and so when it couldn't be them, he thought about insectoids, and insectoids were going to, again, 1988. Were going to be horribly expensive and hard to pull off. And Time Squared was actually supposed to be part one of Q-Who, where the Borg were introduced. But instead of it being the Picard from 6 Hours in the Future, and what the effects guys called the toilet bowl vortex, with the Enterprise going into the thing, that was originally going to be part one of a 2-part show, and to be shown that whole anomaly time, distortion was caused by the Borg, and Q was going to show up in the middle of it, and they were going to blame him for it, and then he's like, no, it wasn't me. I'm trying to protect you from who really caused it.
I think what ended up actually happening though was a lot cooler. It was Q being his typical arrogant self, hurling the crew of the Enterprise through to the Delta Quadrant as we know it now, into the path of these Borg.
Yeah, kind of a cosmic version of tough love.
Yeah, very much so. And whether that, we look at it now as fans, and we will completely psychoanalyze the intricate workings of that episode and how it played out. And if that episode wasn't actually there, would they have met him, and would it have been the best of both worlds, and so on and so forth. And I think that all just comes back to Maurice. He wrote that episode, and he wrote 11 other episodes in Next Gen's first couple of seasons, and he's...
Well, and everybody, when people start looking at credits, remember that when you're the showrunner, you're doing rewrites on almost every script, probably.
So really it was Maurice that created Next Gen and sort of steered it in the direction, even though season 3 is sort of where it found its feet, and that's purely just by having so many characters. It takes time to establish them all and everything else.
That's true. And like Denise Crosby didn't think it was going to happen, and she left the show because of that. She loved the show, but she's like, you're never going to have time to develop my character. But yeah, Maury Hurley they stabilized the writing staff a lot, pretty much. Had some, Measure of a Man, had some great shows in there. But I want to say that it was really Michael Piller that came in and gave it the family feel. Because before that, it was kind of like the show of the week, and there wasn't a lot of continuity from show to show. Not continuity, but I mean there wasn't a lot of follow through. There weren't a lot of arcs.
And Michael's vision of family there certainly came in season 4 with those whole bunch of episodes exploring family with an episode called Family after the best of both worlds.
They were just trying to stay on. They were just trying to stay upright that year. He came in partway through the season.
Yeah, but it was
but
good.
That was his ideal. So we've kind of gotten far astray from Leonard, but the burning question of Next Generation was. You had Dee doing McCoy in the pilot. Who are we going to see? Kirk? Are we going to see Spock? Are we going to see any of the rest of the original series people? Especially Spock, because it fit within the Vulcan lifespan for it to make to be logical. Scotty, they wound up coming up with Ron Moore, the brilliant idea of the transporter time loop as a desperation save, and then who knew it would be 80 years later. But Spock was the one that made sense. So the big news of the 25th anniversary was the last original series movie, Star Trek VI, and at the same time referring to that in the events of a Spock show, the two-parter unification. And that was, oh my God, Spock is going to be on Next Generation. And then that was really a time, back in the day, that was a time of, wow, the shows really have bridged.
And I don't think that it was too much out of place, Spock's cameo in Unification. I think that it certainly is his character to want to help and want to bridge relations between the ancient Vulcans, the Romulans, and the Vulcans. I think that you could sort of tell that was something that Spock was always going to do without you even thinking about it, and then for him to appear.
That was something Spock could do on his own without the context of a crew or a ship, the old context you were used to seeing Spock in, with a dynamic with Kirk and a dynamic with McCoy and a dynamic with his crewmates. That was obviously not going to happen in one-off appearances. So that was a wonderful, structurally to do as for the character, much less the role and the character, what he would really do in history as someone who was outliving everyone he knew, as something that was burning, as something that, taking on the legacy of his father, even as far as someone who could affect galactic politics and galactic relations.
And finally, Larry, let's chat about Harve Bennett. He came on board producing from Star Trek II and worked through to Star Trek V. And what are your thoughts on Harve?
He's the one that got hired in because no one was... the motion picture made a lot of money. Paramount had charged all the development of the on-again, off-again series, little movie, back to a series, all the development money. They were building sets. They had commissioned scripts. They had hired, director Bob Goodwin. John Povil was the story editor. They were staffing up to do the series, and they'd spent a lot of money, and all that cost got dumped on the first movie. So it made a ton of money because that was 10 years of fandom's main objective, was to see a revival of Star Trek. And, people were thrilled to see it, but there was still something, everybody knew there was something a little off. So Charles Bluhdorn, who was head of Gulf and Western that owned Paramount then, is looking around for someone to do a Star Trek movie, but pulling way back on the financials, and doing it for much more modestly. Plus they had sets, they had a lot of assets now. And the famous story of him coming in for the meeting and saying, did you see Star Trek the Motion Picture? Yes. Well, my little girl fell asleep in Act 3, like a lot of people did. Do you think you could do it for cheaper than $45 million? And he says, Mr. Bluhdorn, I could do 4 movies for $45 million. So he says, fine, go do it. But it's Harve Bennett that sat down and watched all the original episodes, who had not been a big fan. He was busy doing TV. Who decided that of all those, that Khan character was just left hanging, and that would be wonderful to go back and look at with the time factor, because it'd been 10 years. So it's Harve Bennett that came up with the idea to redo Khan and go back and revisit that. It's Harve Bennett that found Nick Meyer based on 7% Solution that he'd written and then directed. So, Harve Bennett and Nick Meyer are the heart of what the biggest bulk of the original series movies and how they built and became more and more popular. Star Trek IV is the biggest mainstream movie. 20th anniversary, the studio's thrilled. They decide, after the stations are screaming locally for more episodes, that it's time to bring back a TV series. And then they come up with the idea to go, don't recast, go 80 years in the future and keep it going. So that was a pivotal year, 86. So you go back, and I know I have 4 or 5 people that I say saved Star Trek along the way. You might even argue that Gene Coon saved burned out Gene, gave him a boost right when it was needed right out of the gate. And I'll hang my hat on Michael Piller anytime for coming in the 3rd season and really sending Next Generation into the stratosphere and leading everything that came later. We need to remember, and Nick Meyer said himself that Harve Bennett's, I always took that for granted, and I always would plug Harve and talk about him, but the last 10, 20 years he hasn't been around to talk, really, in the spotlight to talk for himself. So I appreciated what Nick Meyer said when he sent his quote to the trades, that it's something I've always said. My soapbox has always been that we would not have had modern Star Trek without Harve Bennett.
well, we thank him for that, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully, as we sort of went on that tangent there, but that's the great thing about Star Trek, is that you talk about these people and they, as you said there with Harv, affects so much more than just what they were working on. Sure, he left at the end of 5, and he was really only there technically for 4 movies, but he was.
Oh well, I was going to say he really left over 6. He
Sorry,
wanted to do an
yeah.
academy. He wanted to do an academy script. They said yes at first, then came back and said, "Well, we want the original cast one more time for the 25th anniversary." And he said, "No, I want to do my script." And they said, "You're fine. You're welcome to do that." And they had creative differences, and he walked away from it and went on and did a few more series after that, and some really outstanding. He did a Woman Called Golda that was Ingrid Bergman's last movie. She didn't tell anyone, but she had cancer, and he won an Emmy for that. And Leonard Nimoy won an Emmy playing her husband. So it was a great stretch for Leonard.
Well, and yeah, as I was saying, so he was there for that short amount of time, but helped revitalise, as you said, Star Trek into modern Trek, build these spin-off series from Harv, making it popular once again, and we've just got to thank all of them and just be thoughtful that we're losing so many people. It's such a sad thing.
The world, pop culture, and then down to our Trek family. Fans, the creative of creators, the community of the creators themselves, much less the fans, people who worked, the affiliate areas that I have, and gotten to know so many. Everybody felt that. You just knew. I said on Friday I was in a business workshop, and we had turned our phones off, but I guess I still had it where text could come through. And a friend of mine, Lee Walkner, texted me and said, "It's so sad to hear about Leonard Nimoy." And I was thinking, oh, he's back in the hospital for his COPD. And I went, wait a minute. Someone wouldn't be texting me about that. And I was like, uh-oh. And got up and left the room so I could see what was going on. And then I saw, and the internet was melting, tweets and the Facebooks and texting and email, and everything was just kind of, I don't want to say melting down. It was exploding. It was mushrooming with all the love for Leonard. And there was a snowball effect. It was about Leonard, but then people also realized, I did. I said, oh, it's like June 11th, 1999 all over again, which is when Dee died, who was always, McCoy was always my favorite character. We loved Kirk. I loved all of them, but McCoy was the one that always spoke to me the most, and I loved him in the mix of the others. And that was like a gut, Gene had died in 91, obviously, and then Dee in 99, and I tweeted something about how that was like a gut punch, but how Leonard's passing seems like, I said, I feel like I just felt a shift in the universe, and I think everybody was feeling that. And part of that may have been because even with Jimmy passed away in 2005 and Majel even in 2008, we've got social media so much in our lives now, on top of 24/7 communication and 5,000 cable channels and everything. And people are instantly feeling and processing and sharing it, on Twitter, on Facebook, and all of that. And that was a different dimension. And I think the other part of that was, I went through the litany there of the cast after Gene even, and it dawned on a lot of people, we're halfway through the original 8. It's not a one-off event anymore. Dee was the first. With Spock gone, I even saw a thing where people are doing memes and photos and taking, and running the funeral scene from Wrath of Khan all over the place. But someone took that basic cast picture and had Spock and McCoy and Scotty and Chapel grayed out. Like, we've lost 4 of our 8. And I think people were just realizing how precious this all is, and time is going by, and I think people were turning it into their own families and thinking of their parents, and their grandparents. I just saw an awful lot of that. Plus, obviously, people talking about what Spock had meant to them. I had friends in science and space and women even who had been, Spock fans. So much for the Geek Girl Revolution meme. I've been on that soapbox too. We've had women fans since the 60s. But the reaction across the board, it was personal, and also people getting a big picture sense of of a change here.
Larry, as I said, it has been a rough couple of weeks, but thanks so much for taking a little bit of time to sit down and have a chat from the half-completed Trekzone.org studio. It's brand new. We're going to be doing a lot more interviews with Skype and all that sort of stuff. So for the first one in this new studio, Larry, thanks so much for your time. And I know that you've been really busy and you've got a lot of work coming up. So we look forward to hearing about that. And I'll definitely aim to have you back. All right.
Well, thanks, Matt. I wrote a piece, the Star Trek magazine reminded me of what we did with D in '99. They were on deadline and held up to do a little bit of Spock and Nimoy coverage before their next issue, and which is the same thing we did with D. We turned over half a magazine and did memorial coverage and got quotes and things from people. But I just wrote a piece for them and trying to do things on Trekland myself, and now the conventions this year have a whole different feel to them. And I'm sure we'll have all kinds of things happening around the country. And the Vegas convention will be big here in the States. And I've got some conventions coming up, so we'll definitely. I was already planning to talk a lot about Enterprise in space this year, but Spock's going to mean a lot to a lot of different people and a lot of flavors and stripes of Star Trek fandom. So I'm sure this is not the end of the discussion and the remembrance, and is for Harv Bennett as well. And heaven forbid, I said today, can we let hashtag RIP week be done?
Yeah. Larry, again, thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you out there.
Sure thing, Matt.
September 1966. One opening monologue.
Space. The final frontier.
One unforgettable theme tune. September 2016. Trekzone.org will celebrate 50 years since the premiere in a big way.